Grandma Margaret died on a Thursday, 91 years old, sharp until the end. She wore pearls even to doctor's appointments and corrected waiters' grammar with a smile. When the call came, I didn't cry. I made tea, opened my laptop, and stared at a blank document until the sun disappeared. The funeral was formal, tasteful, just like her. I wore a suit I hadn't dry cleaned in 3 years and stood in the back with my hands in my pockets. Cousin Emily sobbed dramatically through the entire service, a pearl-handled tissue dabbing eyes that hadn't blinked in sympathy the last time I saw her. Afterward, the family gathered in the mahogany-paneled office of Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Lane, bald and sunken-eyed, who looked like he'd been waiting for this moment as long as she had. We sat in silence while he read. Jewelry, stocks, property, accounts, everything went to Emily. The language was clinical, definitive. To my beloved granddaughter Emily, I leave the entirety of my estate, in recognition of her continued presence and loyalty. I felt the sentence land in my gut like a shove. There was no mention of me until the very end. Mr. Lane cleared his throat before continuing. To my grandson Samuel, I leave a personal item to be delivered upon my passing. It is located in the vault and marked accordingly. Emily looked at me with a kind of patronizing curiosity, like someone watching a dog try to play the piano. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. I nodded once, tight-lipped. Thank you. Mr. Lane handed me a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. A label in Grandma's handwriting read, "For Sam. Handle with care." It was heavier than it looked. I didn't unwrap it there. I didn't ask questions. I stood, said my goodbyes, and left with my dignity folded neatly over my arm. But inside, something cracked. Not from greed, not even from disappointment, from erasure. I wasn't expecting riches, but I'd expected to matter. We were closer I thought we were. Movie nights. Letters. Her calling me the only one who listens. I drove home in silence, the box on the passenger seat like a forgotten birthday gift. I didn't open it that night. I drank a beer, stared at it, and went to bed thinking about everything she gave Emily and what she must have meant by giving me this instead. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the box in front of me. The brown paper was creased and soft from handling, twine tied in a neat bow like she'd done it herself. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me had already decided it would be useless. Sentimental clutter. A consolation prize. I untied the twine and peeled back the paper. Inside was an old cedar box, scratched at the edges, a brass latch tarnished to green. I opened it slowly. No false bottom, no hidden compartments. Just objects, loosely arranged, like someone had emptied a drawer from another decade. A faded photograph, black and white, edges curled, of Grandma as a young woman standing in front of a theater. A locket on a chain, the clasp rusted. A brittle, handwritten journal that smelled like dust and old perfume. A tarnished key. That was it. No instructions, no note, just this. I sat there staring at it all, feeling equal parts stupid and insulted. Emily got a penthouse and stock portfolios. I got a shoebox of thrift store leftovers. I picked up the locket. It didn't open. The photo was labeled 1953, Ashland, written in her familiar cursive. The journal was fragile, the ink faded to gray, but still legible. I flipped to the first page. It wasn't a diary. It was more like a record, dates, names, thoughts, scrawled in margins. I closed it and stared at the key. Small, brass, unmarked. It rattled when I turned it in my fingers. Useless. All of it. And yet I didn't throw it out. I wanted to. I nearly did. I walked it to the trash, stood over the bin, and just stopped. Something didn't fit. Grandma wasn't careless. She didn't do anything without a reason. I walked back to the table, put everything back in the box, and slid it under my bed like I was a teenager hiding something I didn't understand. Then I sat in the silence of the apartment, letting the weight of it all settle. I didn't know why she gave it to me. I just knew I couldn't ignore it. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice in the back of my head, the way she used to say my name, Samuel, drawn out like a secret. Around midnight, I got up, padded barefoot across the apartment, and pulled the box from under the bed. I opened it on the coffee table, sat cross-legged on the floor, and picked up the journal. The spine cracked like dry wood. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, precise, fluid, a little formal. Not a diary, not exactly. More like a ledger of thoughts, scattered entries stitched together across years. She mentioned names I barely remembered, old neighbors, cousins, friends long past. But then the tone shifted. There are things I never said aloud, she wrote. Mistakes I couldn't undo. Emily's family was a decision I made in fear. It haunts me. I sat up straighter. A few pages later. Truth is not always pretty, but it is necessary. I leave what I can to Samuel. He sees what others overlook. My heart thudded, slow and deliberate. Tucked inside one page was a folded piece of paper, a hand-drawn map. Ink faded, paper yellowed at the creases. The shape was unmistakable. Our family's old cabin near Mount Hamilton. We hadn't been there since I was a teenager. A red X was drawn in the corner of a bedroom. Underneath it, 3 words in all caps. Use the key. That was it. No explanation, no apology. But I could feel it now. This wasn't sentiment. It was a trail. A path she'd left for me alone. I closed the journal, placed it gently back in the box, and sat for a long time in the quiet. She could have given me money, property, a simple explanation. Instead, she gave me a puzzle. A voice in my head, hers, said, "You'll understand when it's time." I grabbed the key, cold in my palm, and turned it over once. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew where I had to start. The road to the cabin was worse than I remembered. Gravel turned to packed dirt, then to muddy ruts winding through the trees. The tires groaned. My breath fogged the windshield. It was colder up here. The kind of quiet that presses in. No cell signal. No distractions. Just me. And the ghosts. The cabin looked the same, slouched and graying, like it hadn't exhaled since the last family trip 15 years ago. I unlocked the front door with the emergency key still hidden under the porch brick. The inside smelled like pine, mildew, and thyme. Furniture covered in white sheets, dust settling like snow. I moved slowly, flashlight in hand. The bedroom in the back right corner, mine, once upon a time had warped floorboards near the dresser. Just like the map showed. I knelt, heart steady but loud. I pried at the board. It resisted, then gave with a groan. Underneath, a metal safe. Heavy, rusted, untouched. I stared at it. She'd put it there, hidden it from everyone but me. I took the key from my coat pocket, slid it in. It turned with a soft, reluctant click. My hands were shaking, just slightly. I opened it. The air smelled faintly metallic. Inside was a stack of documents in a manila folder, a black and white film reel in a canister, and a smaller envelope labeled, "Samuel, Confidential." I didn't touch anything right away, just sat back on my heels, staring at the contents like they might vanish if I moved too fast. Whatever this was, whatever truth she had buried, this was the start, not the end. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was investigating. And I wasn't just the grandson with the box of junk. Not anymore. I pulled the folder out first. The flap crackled as I opened it, careful not to tear anything. Inside were bank documents, some decades old, some recent. A handful of deposit slips with account numbers and dates, amounts that started modestly and grew into 6 figures. At first I didn't understand, but then I found the letter, typed, signed, notarized, dated 3 years ago. It read, "Irrevocable Trust Agreement. Beneficiary, Samuel Wren. My name. In bold. My mouth went dry. I read it twice. Then, a third time. It wasn't a hypothetical. It wasn't an idea. It was real active. Grandma had created a private trust in my name. Assets transferred. Funds invested. No cosigners. No mention of Emily or her mother or any of the other names that cluttered her estate. Just me. A cold sensation washed over me. Not fear, not even shock. More like the room tilting on its axis. There were more letters, some handwritten, others typed. One from a lawyer I didn't recognize. One from a bank in Boston. A note scribbled in Grandma's cursive on the margin of a ledger sheet. They took everything public. I kept something private. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, folder in my lap. All this time I thought she left me behind. Turns out, she'd done the opposite. While everyone else inherited what they expected, I'd inherited what she meant. Not loudly. Not legally contested. But deliberately. She gave them noise. She gave me silence. And in that silence, the truth. My hand went back into the safe, now trembling slightly. Beneath the documents sat a black film canister, labeled simply 1,958. Private. The last thing in the safe was a sealed envelope, addressed in pen. Samuel. Only if you understand. I left it closed. Not yet. I looked around the cabin, musty, creaking, frozen in time. But now, it felt different. Like a vault. Like a message she'd buried beneath everyone's expectations. The trust wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Something else was coming. And I had a feeling the real would show me what the documents couldn't. Back home, I tracked down a projector through a guy on Craigslist who ran an independent theater downtown. He lent me one for free when I mentioned the reel was personal. Just rewind it slow, he said, handing over the case like it was sacred. I set it up on my kitchen counter that night, closed the blinds, and threaded the film like I remembered doing with Grandma years ago summer nights when she used to show me old home movies in the basement while everyone else drank wine upstairs. The reel clicked to life, a whirring hum filling the room. The footage was grainy but clear. No title card. Just a living room Grandma, much younger, sitting stiffly on a floral couch. Across from her stood my grandfather, a man I barely remembered. Their voices were loud enough to make out. "You promised, Margaret?" he snapped. "The money stays with the family." She didn't flinch. "You mean your daughter, who married a man who threatened to ruin us if I didn't change the will?" My breath caught. The angle shifted, the camera panned slightly, like someone else was filming from the corner. "He's not her real father, you know that," she said, quieter now. "But I raised her like she was mine. And I'm not letting her take everything when she's not even—" The audio fuzzed. I sat forward. "You're overreacting," he barked. "It's just money." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's legacy. And I won't let a lie carry it forward." The reel ended abruptly, snapping to white light. I sat in the quiet. It wasn't just family drama. It was revelation. Grandma had buried the past to protect someone. To protect me, maybe. Or the truth itself. Emily's mother, her claim to the inheritance was based on something that wasn't real. I replayed the reel, this time with my phone recording it off the screen. I needed a copy. A backup. Everything she left, Metha key, the map, the box, none of it was junk. It was code. Pieces only I was supposed to fit together. While Emily counted her money, I was following a trail through the ashes of something much older, much deeper. And I wasn't even close to the end. The financial advisor's office was tucked above a coffee shop in an old brick building downtown. No receptionist, just a bell that jingled when I opened the door. David Colson, late 40s, sleeves rolled. Soft-spoken, shook my hand like he'd done this 1,000 times before. "You're the grandson?" he asked, scanning the documents I'd brought. "Of Margaret Wren?" I nodded. He whistled low. "She was a sharp one. Most clients set up trusts like these for tax sheltering or generational planning. This one's different." He pointed to the notarized forms. "It's airtight. Irrevocable. funded independently of her estate. I leaned forward. So it's real? He met my eyes. It's not just real. It's completely protected. No one else in your family can touch it. No probate. No contests. She even set it up under a separate fiduciary name, something she created for privacy. He pulled up a screen on his monitor, typing in numbers. As of last quarter, it's valued at just over 3.1 million. The number didn't hit me all at once. It hovered there, floating between surreal and absurd. It's been untouched since she created it, David continued. She let it grow, purposefully. If you want to move it, restructure it, withdraw, it's yours to do with, as you see fit. I sat back, the chair creaking beneath me. My throat felt dry. She never told me, I said. No one told me. David gave a half smile. Some people say more with silence than others do with speeches. On the walk back to my car, the city looked strange. Same sidewalks, same storefronts, but I felt different. Not rich, not powerful, just recognized, seen. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the one who got junk in a box. Grandma hadn't forgotten me. She'd chosen me, quietly, deliberately. And now, I had a choice to make. Not just about the money, but about what to do with the truth she'd trusted me to find. Brunch was at Aunt Lydia's house, high ceilings, glass table, conversation so forced it creaked. Emily arrived late, wearing a silk blouse and a grin like a headline. Sorry. Estate stuff, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Bank meetings. Portfolio talk. Exhausting. She launched into a monologue about her plans to expand the garden, renovate the sunroom, maybe buy something in Charleston if the market stays soft. I stirred my coffee and said nothing. I watched her float from relative to relative, basking in the glow of her inheritance like it was some kind of divine anointment. She made eye contact with me once. Held it just long enough to smile in that sideways way she had, condescending but polite. She still thought I got nothing. A box of heirloom crumbs. I smiled back, said nothing. On the way home, I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove in silence, the trees flicking past in the rearview mirror, like memories I didn't need anymore. Back at the apartment, I pulled out the sealed envelope from the safe, the one marked, "Only if you understand." I opened it slowly, carefully, like it might fall apart. Inside was a letter, short, handwritten. Sam, if you've come this far, then you know I couldn't leave everything the way it looked. I made mistakes. I let people pressure me. Your aunt, she forced my hand with things I wasn't proud of. The public will wasn't mine, but this is. You always saw what others didn't. That's why I left it to you. I read it twice, then folded it back and placed it on the table. The weight in my chest shifted. Not lighter, not heavier, just different. I wasn't angry at Emily anymore. Not even bitter. She could have the house, the jewelry, the brunch invitations. What I had was something she couldn't fake or flaunt. The real legacy. And the truth buried for years was finally starting to surface. I went back to the documents. I hadn't read everything. Yet some of it felt too heavy the first time through. But that night, I laid it all out on my kitchen table like puzzle pieces. Letters, statements, receipts, the journal, the map, the trust paperwork, the reel. I'd missed one envelope. Tucked inside the manila folder, beneath the bank slips. Thinner, unlabeled. I opened it. The paper was creased from being folded too long. The letter was typed, but the signature hit me like a slap. Marion Ellis, Emily's mother, my aunt, my grandmother's only surviving child. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the message was clear. Margaret, if you want this to go away, you know what needs to be done. I have the documents, the photo, and I'm prepared to take them public. Emily deserves what's coming to her, and if you can't see that, I'll help the world see it for you. I won't let you erase her. No warmth, no hesitation. Just pressure. Thinly veiled threat, dressed up like family duty. My stomach turned. I'd always known Aunt Marion was cold, calculated, polite only when she had an audience. But this was direct manipulation. The photo she mentioned wasn't included, but I didn't need to see it. The implication was clear. Emily's legitimacy, or perhaps her claim to the Wren inheritance, had always been in question. Whatever it was, Grandma had caved. Publicly. Gave Emily everything to avoid a scandal. But privately, she'd built a bunker and put me in it. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about shame. Rewriting the family story to avoid judgment, to avoid questions. But now the truth had claws, and I was holding it by the throat. I met the estate lawyer the next day, recommended by David, the financial advisor. Office in an old mill building, brick walls, shelves full of leather-bound folders. Her name was Chloe Brent. Young but sharp eyes that read too much and missed nothing. I laid out the documents like evidence. She scanned everything in silence for almost 20 minutes. Then, the trust is clean. Set up outside the estate. No exposure to probate or challenge. And the will? I asked. She exhaled slowly. Messier. If what you're suggesting is true, if your aunt coerced your grandmother into rewriting it, then, yes, it could be contested. Fraud. Undue influence. But proving it would take more than a threatening letter. I nodded. I have a film reel, I said. Footage of her and my grandfather. Arguing. It's relevant. Chloe raised an eyebrow. You're thorough. I didn't reply. She leaned forward. You want to contest the will? I hesitated. The question had been hanging in my head since the first trip to the cabin. Now it sat in front of me, solid and unavoidable. Part of me wants to, I said. Not for the money. Just to force them to face what they did. And the other part? Knows how this family handles shame. I left with no decision made. Chloe said I had time, that the evidence was compelling, but the choice was personal. She was right. This wasn't about reclaiming what was lost. It was about deciding whether exposure was worth the fallout. Whether bringing the truth to light was justice or just more fire. On the way home, I took the long route. Windows down, wind cold. At a red light, I found myself staring at the sky. I thought of Grandma, of how carefully she'd hidden the truth, of the years she carried it alone. Maybe she hadn't wanted me to fight. Maybe she just wanted me to know. I found the last envelope by accident. I'd moved the cedar box to the bookshelf in my living room. Couldn't bring myself to pack it away. Not after everything. One night, after pacing for an hour and pouring a drink I didn't really want, I opened it again. This time, I removed the lining. Tucked beneath the base, sealed and yellowing at the corners, was an envelope addressed simply, Sam. In the end. No flourish, no date. Just her handwriting firm, certain. I sat down and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the same kind she used for holiday letters and birthday checks. But there was no pleasantry here. Just truth. Sam, you always saw through people. Through noise, performance, praise. I think you knew something was wrong, long before I did. I gave them what they wanted so they'd stop asking questions. But I saved what mattered for you. Not because you're the best or the brightest, though you might be, but because you're kind. And kind people carry things. You now carry the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I've made peace with my part. Maybe you can too. All I ask is that you don't let it die in the dark. Do what's right. Whatever that means to you. Love always. Grandma M. I read it once, then again. Not a command. Not even a request. A trust. She hadn't given me revenge. She'd given me the facts, the history, the weight of it. And then she'd left the choice in my hands. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the box. I didn't feel pressure. I felt clarity. She hadn't tested my loyalty. She'd tested my discernment. And I finally knew what I had to do. The invitation went out as a quiet email. A small memorial for Grandma. No speeches, no suits, Just remembrance. I sent it to everyone. No one asked questions. They assumed I was grieving late. Processing slow. We met at the community center, where she used to host her book club, the same one she donated to every year, until Emily redirected the estate. I brought no flowers. Just a thermos of coffee and a USB drive in my jacket pocket. The projector was already set up. They trickled in Aunt Marion, looking brittle in designer black. Uncle Roy and his two-day tie. Emily in white, like it made her look softer. Didn't know you were organizing something, she said. You could have told me. Would have ruined the surprise, I replied. When everyone had a seat, I dimmed the lights and hit play. The film flickered to life. The reel. The argument. My grandfather's voice, sharp. My grandmother's, unwavering. Mentions of the will. The blackmail. She's not even. Fuzz. I won't let her take it all. I watched the room more than the screen. Emily sat frozen. Aunt Marion's hand clenched her bag. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was weighted, like the moment before a window shatters. What is this supposed to be? Marion finally said, voice taut. It's the truth, I said evenly. The part you threatened her over. The part she never stopped carrying. Emily stood too fast. Her chair clattered behind her. You ambushed us. No, I said. I just stopped protecting your version. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. I didn't gloat. Didn't yell. I just looked at each of them calm, measured, and let the reel run a second time. When it ended, I walked out. Not to punish, not to shame, just to finally breathe air that wasn't theirs. I didn't sue. That surprised everyone, especially Chloe. She'd prepped the documents, lined up the case, told me we could win, that Emily's inheritance was built on coercion, that we could pull it apart in court. But I didn't want her money. I didn't want their legacy. I wanted to build something new. So instead, I used the trust, quietly, deliberately. I met with a city planner, then a foundation director. I hired a small team. Within 3 months, we broke ground on a building downtown 2 stories, big windows, natural light. When reporters asked about funding, I gave them the truth without the scandal. A gift from my grandmother, Margaret Wren, who believed in quiet good. No lawsuits, no interviews. No need for vindication. The center opened with little fanfare, but steady attendance. Workshops, tutoring, after-school programs. Art on the walls, a lending library stocked with her books. People asked if I named it after myself. I didn't. I called it the Wren House. In the following weeks, Emily stopped posting photos from galas. Her name disappeared from a few charity committees. Not overnight, but noticeably. Her carefully curated image began to fray. Word had spread. Not the full story, but enough the right people saw the film. The right questions were asked. Aunt Marion vanished from most functions. No one called it exile. They just stopped inviting her. The silence wasn't revenge. It was gravity. Eventually, things fall where they're meant to. I didn't visit them. I didn't reach out. I wasn't cruel. I was just done. It rained the day I visited her grave. Not a downpour. Just enough to make the air smell clean. The cemetery was quiet, tucked behind a church she never attended but always donated to. I parked down the hill and walked the gravel path alone. Her stone was simple, Margaret Wren, 1931, 2022. A life lived thoughtfully. I stood there for a while, with the now empty cedar box in my hands. The locket, the journal, the key, they were all in a safe place now. The box had done its job. I set it gently beside the headstone, right where the flowers would go. You were right to trust me, I said, not expecting a response, not needing one. The wind shifted. I stood there a little longer, then turned and walked away, not burdened, not triumphant, just lighter. Seen. The story was no longer about what I didn't get. It was about what I uncovered, what I built, and what I chose to carry. Grandma had given me the truth, and I'd made it matter. 6 months later, the doors opened. Not with balloons or confetti, just a ribbon-cutting ceremony, a short speech from a city council member, and coffee in paper cups. That's how she would have liked it. The Margaret Wren Foundation stood at the edge of downtown bricks, repointed, windows tall and clean, wood floors she would have insisted be kept bare, not buried under carpet. Inside, sunlight fell across shelves of donated books, tables where kids painted quietly, and a corner reading nook with a rocking chair that had once lived in her front room. I walked the halls slowly that morning, greeting volunteers, shaking hands with donors, but mostly I watched. A girl helping her younger brother with homework. An elderly man tracing his finger down a list of community workshops. A woman setting up chairs for a parenting group. These weren't people who knew the story. Not fully. Not the letters, the threats, the trust, the film. They didn't need to. What mattered was what had come out of it. Not a court case, not an exposé, but a place. A space where something broken had been quietly rebuilt. Near the entrance stood a small bronze plaque. I hadn't asked for it. The board insisted. It read, "Founded by Sam Wren grandson and guardian of the truth." I stared at it longer than I meant to. There wasn't pride in it exactly. Just confirmation. Like a sealed letter finally opened, the meaning of it all laid bare. I hadn't inherited a fortune. I'd inherited a choice. And I made it. Not for revenge, not for show, but to finish a story that had started in silence and ended in something permanent. Someone called my name of the board members, asking if I'd like to say a few words. I shook my head gently. "Let's just let the space speak," I said. They nodded. No pressure. I stepped back and watched the room fill, quietly alive with strangers whose lives were being shaped by the work. Outside, the sky was clear, cold, but bright. I slipped my hands into my pockets and walked to the curb. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The building stood behind me. So did the past. And both of them were finally in good hands. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.